There we go.
Thank you. Rhan da bawb, John Williams dwi Gadeirydd y Bwrdd Iechyd Prifysgol Bai Abertawe. Croeso cynnes i'r cyfarfod arbennig y Bwrdd prynhawn ma. So good afternoon everyone. I'm John Williams, the Chair of Swansea Bay University Health Board, and a very warm welcome to today's special meeting of the board. The board is the governing body of the organisation, and normally we have a bi-monthly meeting cycle when we cover the breadth of our agenda. There are times, however, when we have to come together for specific single issue purposes because of a matter that we have to give urgent attention to. And that's the case today, because we are continuing to face significant financial challenges and we need to discuss an updated financial assessment and the actions that we have to take now and the end of March to address the savings gap that we still have. So with that, I'll turn to apologies, and we've had quite a few this afternoon. Jean Church, independent member, Nouria Zoleh, independent member, and Keith Lloyd, independent member, Chris Morell, who's the Director of Therapies and Health Science, and Jill Richardson, our Interim Executive Director of Public Health. Do we have any other apologies, please, Carys?
No, not that we've received.
Okay, thank you. And if I turn to 1.2 on the agenda, does anyone have any declaration of interest in relation to the content of the report in front of us, outside interests already registered? No? Thank you very much. Well, with that then, we will turn to the substantive item, as I've said, the updated financial assessment. And I do apologise to the board for the very late receipt of this paper. We are meeting today because we want to have the absolute up-to-date position before 10 members of the board join the Cabinet Secretary and his officials for a public accountability meeting on Thursday lunchtime. So we've been trying to ensure that the information coming here is the absolute latest we can have. So my apologies for that. And Darren, on that basis, would you just take the board through the report, not page by page in detail, but to make sure that all board members have full sight of the key matters, please?
Yes, diolch, John. Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. I'll certainly do that. So the purpose of this report is to set out the clear actions that we collectively need to take to close the current savings gap in our plans. And I'll just take you through the context through to the key actions. So if I turn you to page 4 of the report, that just sets out where the health board is at the end of month 8. We reported a 4.2 million deficit in the month. That's our second best of the year to date, 4.1 being achieved a month before. And that takes us to a total deficit year to date of 51.4 million. That deficit means we're 12.3 million above our stated plan. If you take the rest of the year into consideration, we now have only 7 million, just over 7.3 million to play with to get to our stated deficit plan of 58.7 million, which means we now have to come in at an average of 1.8 million a month deficit or better. As I said, our best month being 4.1. One of the primary drivers of that position, notwithstanding there are always operational pressures in organisations, is our ability to meet our savings plan, hence the substantive item today. At the top of page 5, I just update board members there on the current status of that savings plan. We have £55.4 million worth of plan options available to us. That was the savings target we set ourselves at the start of the year, and at this point our forecast delivery against that plan is 42.4 million. 33.8 of that relates specifically to detailed savings schemes that we use on our tracker. I'm using that advisedly because that's the way in which we exchange information with Welsh Government through the tracking process. But we've also got guaranteed a further 8.6 million of other opportunities that we've identified this year, which we know we will deliver, but that don't meet the tracking criteria. So we will describe a plan of £42.4 million worth of savings to be grown through the actions we'll take today. But those two individual points are really important in terms of the transparency of how we're reporting savings as an organisation. And board members will be aware that our key focus for the balance of this part of the plan now is that we have executive-led savings streams, and we have year-end spend controls focused on variable pay, an aspect of planned care and non-pay. And the quantum of those is almost sufficient to meet the gap that we have to address, and I'll just take us through that in a moment. Particularly at the top of page 6 then, you can see the current status of those executive-led schemes. That was previously 6.8 million, and you can see there the distribution of where those options are. I've set out in the middle of page 6 just a note about urgent emergency care. We have some work planned to look at the bed model and the composition of the Health Board's beds going into January. But we've also undertaken the detailed review of the cost recognition and investments that the board has made over previous years into urgent emergency care. Our current assessment of that is that we are unable to release those investments back into the system at this stage due to the way in which services are currently configured. But through our planning process, we will redesign those services, and we will continue to robustly test against those investment choices and release the money where possible through that. There are opportunities in urgent emergency care around the investment that we've made into the workforce design of the minor injury unit in Neath Port Talbot Hospital, and that's currently being scrutinised. And in parallel with that, there is further work ongoing relating to a community services review. We have many different teams doing really good work in the community. We've got some expertise in at the moment just to look at how that could be configured more optimally going forward. And we'll receive that, or the first findings of that, towards the end of December. So there are other things that we can do in that respect. This is important because this 5.9 or 6.8 as it was savings delivery drives nearly £30 million worth of recurrent benefit into next year. And as board members, we will know that we have a very clear plan and a set of actions to make sure that we start next year as well as we possibly can and learn the lessons from previous years. And those lessons learned are that we must deliver more recurrent savings and grip our cost base. So we have to step through these in a very structured way to put the recurrent savings in place. It's good for this year, it's very good for next year as well, and we mustn't lose sight of that. From a variable pay perspective, I know board members will have been on a journey with us around the increased controls we've introduced through our strategic partner, particularly across workforce, to the point now where at least 4 or 5 of my executive colleagues are the end sign-off of variable pay and vacancies across all of the workforce. But we agreed at our Recovery and Sustainability Board meeting on the 10th of December, last Wednesday, that we will now enhance that further with a system-based control. So rather than human intervention on workflow, we will be setting hours-based budgets for the nursing workforce, and those will form the basis of a 50% reduction of variable pay. The expertise around the hubs where those hours will be put into place are being led by Liz as the nurse director, but we'll have a very clear risk assessment process through there, because we will have to distribute the available variable pay over the month and not run out of it early in the process because we're meeting other demands. And the other thing, just to reflect on page 7, is we are seeing some pressures in sickness absent at the moment. That's at the 5th paragraph down, and that's in the context at the moment of increased acuity through our emergency flows in particular. So whilst we're doing this, we are very cognizant of the fact that the demand shape for us is changing a little in the last few days, and we need to be cognizant that going into the Christmas period, but also that the sickness absence is affecting our staff. So we need to deploy this flexible workforce variable pay reduction intelligently to make sure we can maintain business continuity and safety. Bottom of page 7 then just refers to, from a very welcome perspective, this is a celebration of our success. We've been asked to see more outpatients from Swansea Bay, another 3,000 this year, to reduce access times for those. And we're also going to be doing some extra cardiac surgery cases and bariatric surgery cases for the health boards. We must make sure that we get sufficient recompense for those, and through our monitoring processes we must be really clear that if we are to incur variable pay to get that activity done, it's separate from the system of control I've just described. And this needs to stem further than nursing. We need to implement this 50% reduction across all of our workforce areas, utilising the controls already in place and further controls as we would see them. Page 8 draws out the controls we put in place around non-pay. Most of these are in place, so we have already communicated these to the organisation. We have reduced approval levels for senior leaders in the organisation, so more senior people are looking at lower cost items to make decisions about what's approved and what's not. I've seen the launch of the Making Every Pound Count campaign through the Chief Exec's midweek message today, and I'm also considering with procurement colleagues a potential opportunity to block catalogue lines towards the end of the year should we need to do that. I'm also running an exercise at the moment to just make sure that every pound of capital spend is assigned to capital and is not filtered and leached into the revenue position as well. And finally, on non-pay, we're midway through an exercise to look at whether there's any spend that we would discretionarily make in the last quarter that we could defer beyond the 31st of March. There's a target of 700,000 on that. We've already got 350,000 identified, and we'll make sure we deliver that. So when you bring all of that together, and we're at the table at the top of page 9, you'll see there that of the 13.1 million gap, we have direct implementable plans to get to 11.7 of that. So there's still a shortfall. I'm not going to repeat some of the detail I've just discussed across pages 9, 10 and 11 because the time frames are in there, and I know board members will have had a quick chance to read those. So it'll take us then to the next steps, next opportunities that are set out on pages 11 and 12 of the report. And these are important because we do need to be able to bridge the gap between the 11.7 and the 13.1. These are fourfold. The first one is that we could consider a further reduction in variable pay to 60%. And we know the quantification of that would bring a further 1.4 million to the savings system. We need to be very carefully considerate of the impact of taking that further, and we will do that assessment immediately just to see if we can push further in that area. I mentioned earlier that we will be looking at the investment made in the workforce of the minor injury unit and the community systems review, and we think there's probably about 400,000 in there if we can move people around and eliminate some of the variable costs in that. And quite importantly, and need to be really clear on this, we have to treat a further 1,397 people by the end of March to achieve our 104-week target, which is a commitment that the board has made. However, we have more theatre slots available in the last quarter, particularly just for planned care, above that 1,397. So we're going to consider how we might cohort patients into funded theatre lists and see what capacity we can stand down, protecting the patients we need to see by the end of the year, but using our money and the allocation of our money, particularly in the theatre environment, in a much more diligent way into the last quarter. So there's a rich vein of work there. We've got lots of the analysis already in place, but what we need to make sure is we optimise the opportunities of that whilst not jeopardising the delivery of that particular target. And on the second paragraph over the page on page 12, I've just drawn out that whilst we're doing that, we will be looking at theatre productivity and utilisation. Again, our strategic partner has identified potentially up to 8 million opportunity there on a full year basis. So we won't get all that out in quarter 4, but hand in hand with the theatre review, we will look at the utilisation of those theatres and the throughput of them as well. And similarly, we will do the same in outpatients because we know clinic templates can be optimised. We need to look at modernisation, how we use our community-based resources as well. There's a significant sum to go at. So we're going to look at the theatre alignment with the cohort of patients we need to see, the efficiency of the theatre environment and the efficiency of the outpatient area as well. And then the last bullet point in this section of 4 further things we will look at is in quarter 4, we start to get more certainty across our contracts with other health boards, services they buy from us, services we buy from them, and the relationship with the Joint Commissioning Committee. And I think we just need to pay really due diligence to how those contracts are behaving and to see whether there's a safe and sustainable way to release financial resource through those whilst maintaining our Commissioner responsibilities. My assessment is that through a blend of the 4 of those, we will be able to close that gap, but clearly appreciate the board will want to see those plans and the risk and impact, the impact assessments of anything further we would do beyond those in the 11.7. This detail of this report was taken through the Performance and Finance Committee this morning. There was a slightly different report this morning, so this report to board reflects all conversations to executive team yesterday and Performance and Finance Committee today. And at the foot of page 12, I've just set out there that the Finance Committee has considered the actions in the 11.7 and the further work, which I'm sure colleagues in that meeting will wish to comment on. And finally, and I'm not going to do the detail on this in this discussion, but I've just set out over pages 13 and 14 some of the risks we're looking to mitigate and manage in the run rate of the health board, and also some of the one-off opportunities we will have to mitigate those. But I'm seeing those 2 things as separate and hand in glove. We must pay due attention to the level of savings we have to make, and to make those recurrently and to maintain the grip on those areas to achieve what we said we would do. I'll pause there, Chair. I'm sure we'll pick up the recommendations later, but hopefully that's a helpful introduction to the scope of the paper.
Thank you. Abby, do you want to add anything to that now at this stage before I open up for questions?
Thank you very much, John. I guess just 2 points for positioning. The the need for us to push this further into the last quarter in the way that Darren's described is something very much that individual execs and us collectively have discussed and signed up to. And colleagues may want to come in and furnish board members with a little bit more detail in relation to each of those. And just a reminder, really, that this is against the backdrop where we have increased our staffing numbers over the last few years, and we have increased expenditure in certain areas that hasn't necessarily on one side of the equation, and haven't been able to secure recurrent savings on the other side of the equation. And Darren's point about landing more substantially the recurrent nature of this savings programme is absolutely critical as we go into next year. We do have the work of Deloitte to help guide us in terms of what's driving our underlying deficit, and working with us as we push harder on the programme of work that they have developed with us. And what you're seeing in the actions proposed is a tightening of that as we go into the last quarter. Just on the planned care, we have got a savings to be confirmed. We will push that very hard. And in Performance and Finance Committee this morning, Deloitte colleagues were able to join part of the conversation to share that they will be supporting that programme of work, and will put some intensive capability and support around us, particularly working with Deb's team, so that we can drive that further cost reduction opportunity through that mechanism. John, there'll probably be other questions, and I'm happy to come in at other points. I know that there will be questions about mental health, and I'll pick that up as they come along, unless you want me to say something about that at this point.
Well, would it be helpful to start off with mental health, given the sort of significant cost pressures we have there? So,
Yeah.
Abby, before you come in, shall I ask any colleagues, do you want to ask any specific questions around mental health? Nicola, I know that you have one.
Thank you, Jan. Thanks, Abby. Yeah, my question is, obviously I completely agree there's a huge cost monthly regarding the mental health, but obviously that they were transferred out of area for a reason. So what are we going to do in the short term to ensure facilities locally are safest for our residents?
Thank you. Thank you, Nicola. Does anyone else have a mental health related question? No? Oh, yeah, sorry. Martin, do come in.
It was just a point, really, that to be clear, are we separating out mental health and learning disability as two separate entities in any discussions? Okay, that's reassuring. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Martin. That's a really important point. And Rena, did you want to come in?
Yeah, just a quick one to see what Abby's view or Deb's view would be on what the engagement of our partners, social services in both Neath and Talbot and Swansea in this agenda, because in a way we do need to get them on board if we are going to repatriate patients back into the community. Thank you. Thank you,
Rena. So Abby, shall I turn to you then first, and then Deb can come in after that?
Yeah, thank you. Martin, just coming back to your point, I think one of the things that has been unhelpful is that we have talked at cross purposes at times, where we've lumped in both mental health and learning disability, and I think it's really helpful to separate those things out. And just to say, by way of context and background, I've initiated a more detailed deep dive into the allocation and the budget and the line-by-line performance of that in relation to mental health and learning disability services. We had the first of that meeting last night that Darren and Deb joined with the service group and Deloitte and Melanie Walker. And what we do know is the two things driving at over 12% excess run rate against the budget. We have the variable pay, which colleagues have talked about. We've really got to accelerate the work on a sustainable workforce for mental health services and learning disability. The challenges and the requirements will be different there, but if I take adult mental health services now, and what we do know is that we have got a much higher utilisation of variable pay than we can afford, and we need to address that very quickly. If I recall the figures from yesterday, last week we used 134, 136, I can't remember which it is, whole-time equivalents in 1 week for the service group. And clearly that has implications for quality and safety of our service too. I think most of that has come from bank, but so it's not expensive agency, but notwithstanding that shifts in addition to those that we've got in terms of core staffing, and that raises all sorts of sustainability questions. So we will work at pace to look at how we might address any particular urgent service issues around acuity, and whether actually offsetting some of this variable pay spend, which inevitably will have a higher cost as we secure some of the core posts that we need to have in the workforce. So that's the variable pay aspect of it. In relation to the cases that you were referring to, Nicola, where we have seen an uplift in the number of patients who are being placed in provision outside of our health board footprint, so into acute beds for mental health, either for an assessment or following assessment, because we don't have treatment beds available within our own footprint. We've got a meeting on Thursday night to review that with the service group. Colleagues will recall that one of the recommendations from our specialist advisor was immediate cessation of the surge beds that we've got on the 2 TOWIE clinic wards, because they were wholly inappropriate for care and treatment of our patients. We have done that, but those are only 2 beds, and we're seeing a much higher volume of referrals into placements out with, which is not great always for our patients in terms of their continuity of care and breaks in their pathway of care. So again, we are meeting on Thursday night where we will review all of those cases, and we will look for a plan from the service group about how we can ensure that we are utilising our beds to very best effect, and minimising and reviewing and scrutinising in detail where those placements are. One of the things, Nicola, that we also need to get on top of, which is the work that Marie is driving, is that we've got into the melting pot. When we describe continuing healthcare in its term, it also includes funding for complex care, joint packages of care, Community 117, which is the required order package post admission. Those are all lumped in together, which really doesn't help us understand what the driver is. And of course, the local authorities will be contributing to many of those packages of care, of joint packages of care. So the work that Marie is doing to unpick all of that, have a governance oversight around these processes, is in train. But we are having to move from what's a paper-based system, which is really hard to oversee and understand fully, into a system which is much more digitally based and enables us to keep a really close handle on those packages and movement in practice. So I think there's been a bit of a sense that we've thought that they were all pure continuing healthcare in terms of some of that discussion, but many of them will already be joint packages of care. John, I think that, Chair, if I may, that the broader issue about local authority partnership plays in respect of the risk that we're facing going into this winter. The underlying deficit report that Deloitte is finishing with us does allude to bed numbers and being over bed capacity when you benchmark. There's some questions that we still need to check to make sure we're counting apples and apples in that regard. But if you think about it, we've still got just shy of 200 of our acute beds occupied by patients who do not need to be there. And that's where we are working very hard with our local authority partners, but we need to get further traction on what we need to do, which the things that are within our gift to increase the timeliness and speed with which we plan for discharge and transfer of patients into the next level of care. And we have certainly got to escalate with our local authority partners, ensuring their timely response in terms of where a social worker is absolutely required for assessment. I think too often we think they might be and they shouldn't be in a trusted assessor model, and how we ensure that packages of care are available to prevent our patients coming to harm through deterioration. So there's more work to be done in those areas. John, sorry that those were long answers to two important questions. I'm sure Deb will want to add to those.
Thank you. Deb, do come in.
Yeah, so just briefly, Jan, I mean, Abby covered off the lion's share of that, just specifically to Nicola's query on the reasons for outlaying, how we work to improve our infrastructure. So when we look at why we've got patients out of area, there's three main reasons for it. So it's the acuity, so our PICU patients in particular, we've got access to 4 beds, which are generally we utilise well. So it's when we go over and above that, the only alternative is for us to look for out of area. The rest of our infrastructure, so we've only got 1 seclusion room available in our infrastructure for our patients. It's usual to have at least 1 per ward. We've got 1 for 3 wards. So when that 1 seclusion space is full, again, the acuity of that patient means that it's inevitably going to be an out of area placement. And then the third one, which is more in our gift, is obviously our overall capacity and how do we use that better. It is worth noting, Chair, that the issue pertaining to out of area placements isn't unique to Swansea Bay at the moment. So we've had feedback from other health boards. They are seeing a similar pattern to us. So it's how do we work collaboratively, I think, either to provide capacity in a different way, and looking how we work in partners is how do we step patients down out of the hospital setting into the community setting in a safe way. That'll probably take a bit more work for us in the service transformation space, but they're the 3 areas that we've got to look at. Obviously, the physical infrastructure, we'll be linking in with JCC and partners on how our estate configures going forward.
Thank you. And I think the point that probably Nicola and Rena wanted to make, I mean, in terms of the text in the paper, that we need to repatriate all existing placements over the next 4 to 8 weeks and also ensure no further patients are placed. So what's the level of confidence in being able to do this, given, you know, we're not going to suddenly have more PICU beds or more seclusion beds, etc. So what's the level of risk around this then?
I would say for the first 2 points, Chair, it is down to individual patient acuity and making sure those patients are safe. So if we don't have the facilities locally and we're confident that the patients who are in those facilities need them locally as well, then there is no alternative other than to place them not in our boundaries. So whether that's a more of a conversation with other Welsh health providers in the first instance, or whether that's an out of area one. We don't want to place patients out of area unless it's absolutely necessary, A, for the cost, but also obviously for the facility, close family alignment, etc., that goes along with that. I think the capacity of the one is the one we've got to really get underneath. That's in our gift, and we need to act on that more quickly to make sure we can reduce those numbers where it's things that are in our control, that we do that really quickly.
Thank you. And as we said, Abby, you've got a meeting on this on Thursday evening to actually really assess what we can do better in terms of our own capacity. And as Rena said, working in partnership with both third and local authority partners. Abby, do you want to come back on that one?
No, sorry, I put my hand up by mistake, Jan, sorry.
Okay, that's okay. So any other points on the mental health issues in the paper? Because we've obviously noted the risk now around, you know, our ability to repatriate all placements before the end of March, really, but work is going to be underway to make sure we can bring back into our own capacity the optimum number we can, and try to stop any further outplacements as well. Thank you. So Darren, you'll need to have a look at, won't you, what possible quantum can actually come into play.
Yeah, certainly, Chair.
Thank you. So should we move on to another area then? Who would like to come in next with a particular area of questioning? Pat.
Hi, thanks. Yeah, I think another area where it would be good to get more insight here to give us more confidence is on the UEC savings, the 1.6 million. So we're looking at 30 clinically optimised patients to move to Singleton in early January. And then the closure of expensive surge beds in Morrison is going to release pay and non-pay savings. I just, you know, given discharge issues and UEC demand, etc., it's about the confidence in that and the likelihood of that. And I think in some ways related to that, then one of the points that I think it would be good to raise with Welsh Government is our plan is to reduce our numbers by at least 100 clinically optimized, isn't it, by March? To have some handle on what's the cost of that to us, because it's something I do think we need to raise, because that is replicated right across Wales in every health board. And I think some kind of challenge with Welsh Government about their stance on it and what they're doing to work on this might be helpful for Thursday.
Thank you, Pat. Now, does anybody else want to come in on the question of UEC savings and the opening of a ward in Singleton? Anybody's questions related specifically to this point? No? Okay, so Steve, Nicola and Louise, yours are separate areas of questioning. Okay, so who wants to come back then on the points around UEC? Debbie, you can start on that?
Yes, Chair, I'll do that. So, yeah, so firstly, on the UEC bit, you know, I am committed to finding that 1.6 million. That's what's in the plan. We need to find it. Darren and I are having a meeting tomorrow. I know we're going to squeeze in our diaries, but we shall, to go through the detail of that and look at the plan that we've got for all of the things we've agreed to do now to make sure that we can get to that 1.6 million. If it's short, we're going to have to look at something else to go alongside that. So I fully recognise that, and we will do everything we need to do in that space. On the clinically optimised patients move and the transfer into Singleton in particular, it may seem a little bit counterintuitive that we're just moving patients around and it's going to release money, but we need to understand that where we've got those patients at the moment, they are scattered across all of our hospital footprint, particularly in Morriston, generally 3 or 4 per ward. So they're being managed in the same way as an acute new admission would be managed on that ward, from a staffing perspective. So cohorting those patients together gives us the opportunity to change the staffing model for those. So that'll be reduced nursing, or reduced registered nursing in particular, certainly reduce medical input because they shouldn't be in hospital. They will have a named consultant responsible, but they won't be having dedicated input from the consultant body. So that'll radically change the model that we've got. The plan for the first 30, which we said will be the week of the 5th of January, will be to decant the patients out of these surge areas that we've got. Those surge areas are not just using a staffing model that's not the right model for the patients. It's also additional staffing because they're in surge beds. So immediately we will be saving the costs of those surge beds in that system. We will be putting dedicated social worker time into those beds, Chair, and we are currently funding 2 social workers to support Swansea Local Authority. We will cease funding one, and the second one we will fund directly to go into that ward to make sure we've got designated social worker support, because that's the critical bit for us, particularly for Swansea residents at the moment. So that's a plan for us. We will work through those 30 as quickly as possible. The plan by cohorting them is to get far more focused attention from all of the staff groups that they need to be involved in the discharge plan. And then once we've turned them over, we'll release the next 30. That will take your next patients out and give us that opportunity to create that decant space that we need in Morriston, which takes the cost of a full ward out of the system as well then. Just more broadly then, obviously on the Pat's question on the 100 COPs. 100 COPs given our ward configuration at the moment is 4 wards. So that's probably circa £6 million is costing us a year for keeping those wards open. That's on top of, because they're in a mixed ward in that environment, their length of stay is longer, so that head cost per patient starts to get even more broadly than just keeping a ward open. And they don't do very well, so we know they're at more at risk of fall, they're more at risk of coming to some significant harm, which again puts overall costs into the system. But even just Barndorf 4 wards, we're looking at £6 million. I think my math's right on that, Darren, and I'm not making that bit up.
Yeah, there are layers of cost based on how quickly they come out, because you rightly said there's the variable pay, there's the variable non-pay, and then there's the strata of medical therapy and other support services like domestic. So yeah, it'll be between 6 and 10 certainly.
Thank you. Abby, do you want to come back on that point before I go back to Pat on the issue she raised? Yeah.
I just wanted to set this in the context of the winter season and where we are in terms of respiratory virus, because I think the other thing the exec team just need to review is making sure that not just specifically around flu, if you take our wider admissions from respiratory virus, I think we need to check that we are making very best use of the virtual wards, and that we're leaning our respiratory as well as geriatricians into that model where we can to support prevention of admissions. And again, wrapping around some of the community response to look at how we can support breathlessness, because we're piloting the pathway around breathlessness, and looking at things like nebulizing at home, IV antibiotics at home without requiring a full-blown admission. So we've got the benefit of the virtual wards. We need to make sure every one of the beds available in the virtual ward is being utilised so that we can keep people away from acute hospital admissions if it can be at all prevented. So that's some work we need to do rapidly over the next week as we run in and review the reset week and the winter plan.
Yeah, thank you, Abby. And it would be helpful for the board to have an update on how the clusters are using their virtual wards, because we should have a 30 bedder per cluster, shouldn't we? Which should give us 240 beds. I'm not certain we do have 240 in play, but if we could find out exactly what the situation is, and then if we could bring in 240 and end the variable use per cluster, then that might help us significantly in Q4. Thank you, Abby. So Pat, you wanted to flag what we could ask on Thursday around the support we're looking for from Welsh Government around helping reduction. So how would you like to frame that?
It's not really, it's just to raise with them about the cost to Swansea Bay of those 100 additional, it's 100, isn't it, additional cops that we're keeping, and to raise with them as an issue that replicates across all health boards. And it may be an area where there's a need for some kind of urgent task and finish group that looks how, you know, that is particularly funded. We know money's gone into local authorities, but you don't see a reduction in cops. So there is just something that needs exploring there nationally, I think, about the approach. And I mean, one of them we banged on about for decades is pool budgets and, you know, etc. So there does need to be some kind of recognition from Welsh Government and some drive to explore that, I think, nationally.
We will get a question on Thursday, I think. How are we working with our partners on delayed pathways of care? And perhaps we can weave it into that, Pat. We can weave it into that whole area. Because the Cabinet Secretary does chair a National Integrated Care Leadership Board. I'll leave it there. Okay.
Yes.
So that we'll pick up on Thursday. Marie, did you want to come in on that point?
Yeah. Just quickly. I mean, this has long been an issue, not just for us in Swansea Bay, but as you've noted across Wales as well. Every health boards are dealing with this. We had an improvement throughout the year. It's deteriorated again now. Every other health board has got their delays increasing. So we're not alone. We're not an outlier, but we absolutely do have a focus on it. So we've got Kelly Gillins from the RPB, who is now chairing a daily longest waits pathway of care delay patients. It is really hard yards. Deb and I have both had our sleeves rolled up in the last couple of weeks getting involved in there too. There are lots of patients that are delayed with clearly non-medical reasons. So there is a lot of collaborative work to try and look at how do we address it. We know local authorities have put additional resources in, but as fast as they've put them in, they've been falling out as dom care workers and social workers have been falling ill with all the symptoms that our staff are as well. So it's not something that's quiet or silent. It's something that we do have good visibility on and improving visibility on. What we don't have is a panacea at this point, but lots of joint working, quite a lot of frustration in that place as well. I think it would be fair to say.
Okay. So we will come back to this on Thursday, Pat, because we have a specific area of questioning around it. So Nicola, shall we turn then to your new area of questioning, please?
Thank you, Chair. It's regarding some of the suggestions such as banning printing, stationery, putting restrictions on catalogue for furniture, etc. What assurance do we have that the message regarding the financial situation is filtered through to the whole of the health board? And what are the consequences for any department who have not delivered on any planned deficit?
Thank you, Nicola. Anyone else want to add or build on that question? Anne-Louise, do come in.
Thank you. Mine is a similar sort of question, but perhaps slightly wider. It's given the critical financial situation, can we assure our staff and patients that the quality and safety of the services that they continue to deliver won't be adversely affected or impacted by the financial constraints? And what communications are we putting out to reassure them that it is business as usual, but slightly different?
Thank you. So those are the two areas of question. And then perhaps, Abby, I can talk with you. How far is this understanding of the financial challenge and the need for everyone to own this embedded across the organisation? And what assurances around safety and quality of services? Abby.
Yeah, thank you very much. And Louisa, I think it's really important the organisation understands it's not business as usual, that we have to take extraordinary action in the last quarter of the year to get us to where we need to be, because the things that we've had in place in the first half of the year haven't delivered. So I think it is a different style and tone of the message that needs to come through the organisation. Yes, of course, we need to continue to provide patient care day in, day out. And we need to make sure there is a very strong focus on patient safety. But taking some of this action doesn't happen without there being consequences of some ilk. And we just need to make sure we fully understand that and make sure that the risk assessments that we have alongside these actions are explicit about that. I'll probably come to Richard and Liz to talk about how we have oversight, and probably Deb in terms of safe patient care. But I think the message is it needs to be different and not business as usual as we go into the final year. Richard probably will want to comment on the comms, because in a sense, we need to do it at 3 levels. We need the leaders to take ownership and responsibility for this. And I think this also plays into the fact that we haven't embedded the performance and accountability framework. We have accountability letters for each service group director, and we'll need to review those as part of this and think about what consequences there are where service groups haven't delivered what was required of them, and the corporate teams as well. So we'll need to work that through, but the message needs to be leaders at the top of the organisation. So we've created a top leaders forum. We had the first meeting of that last week, where it's very clear what the ask was for this year and going into next year in terms of the driver metrics, particularly in relation to the workforce changes that we need to make. And then Richard's been focusing on how do you filter that through every level of the organisation. So frontline porters, those who work in hotel and catering, understand that they've all got a job and a role to play as well. And I think setting some of these changes in behaviour, we need to continue into next year. So they're not we need to do them to the end of the financial year. We'll need to make sure the grip that we're putting in these controls, we release very, very carefully into the next financial year, so that we don't have the floodgates opening. And some of the lines of expenditure, we've really got to challenge why they have happened and why they're continuing at the rate that they are. But this gives us the very clear mandate to go and have those conversations. Rich, do you want to say a little bit more about your thinking around the different levels through which we're communicating?
Yeah, very, very briefly. I think we've spent quite a bit of time now painting the context in terms of the financial challenges that we've got and explaining the financial position. Clearly, more needs to be done. That's where the controls come in. So what we need to do is actually explain the controls that will be implemented if the board now agrees the proposals within the paper. So we need to clearly explain that so the staff know and understand why we're doing some things. But the other thing that Abby touched upon is going beyond that. We need to get all staff to play their part as well, and that's where the Making Every Pound Count campaign comes in, making it very, very clear that everybody can do their bit over and above the savings projects that are in place and the enhanced controls that we're putting in place as well. So it's a 3-pronged approach to that, which I think is really, really important. And we've already started that work as well.
Thank you, Richard. Darren, do you want to add to that? Are you on a different point?
It's related to Anne-Louise's question about quality, Chair, if that's okay.
All right. Okay.
Yeah.
Abby, did you want Liz to comment on the messaging and ownership? And perhaps I could also ask Richard Evans if he would come in on that in relation to medical and dental staff. Is Liz with us?
I am, yes, I'm here.
There we are. I can't see everyone on the screen, sorry. Liz, did you want to comment on that?
On the communicate? I think both Richard and I have professional forums, and we meet regularly with our teams, and we've been very clear about the situation we're in through that. How that then translates down to all of our teams across all of our areas. We really do need this campaign, I think, to share that. I think meeting with the top 100 leaders is significant, and we were able to share exactly where we are. So in a way, that was really setting out our challenge and the part that all of us play in that. And I think we need to continue to do that. But for me, around leadership within nursing, it is regular contact. I'm meeting with the ward leaders, I'm meeting with the team leaders. And I believe, the challenge that we face, I need to do that, as Rich does, I know, with his clinical director. So, the constant engagement is absolutely crucial to this. From a quality and safety perspective, we do have impact assessments that we will undertake on all of our schemes, and as SROs we'll do that and have those for our leadership in those schemes. We have revised that somewhat, and we've put something around risk appetite in there, and we're going to take that through RNS next week. But it is our duty of quality to ensure that we keep our patients safe. I'm sure Darren's going to come in, because I kind of guess what he's going to say. If we do things well and do things efficiently, the quality will come out. And I think we do know that there are inefficiencies in the way that we're delivering at the moment, and that's what we will be focusing on. From an oversight perspective, there will be daily oversight of staffing in our wards and in our teams, so we can ensure that we do not compromise safety, but that we work together to ensure that we can reduce, specifically for nursing and midwifery, variable pay. Yeah.
Thank you. So Richard Evans, would you like to come in? Because we always focus on nursing and midwifery, don't we? Because they form the bulk of our clinical staff in a sense. But it is our medics really who incur and drive costs really in terms of practice. So how do you ensure that your clinical directors, etc., and the consultant body in the organisation really understands this agenda and their significant role in owning it?
Yeah, thanks, Jan. They definitely do, and that's by cascading those messages through various fora, whether that's through the service group medical directors, through the clinical senate, which is largely the service group medical directors plus the clinical directors and the clinical leads. 2 weeks ago, Deloitte came to that and gave a presentation and an opportunity to discuss with Deloitte, highlighting the areas of opportunity. I was actually meeting this morning with newly appointed consultants. That's consultants who've been appointed largely within the last 12 months in the Health Board, again reiterating that message and also emphasising that it's not just those people in formal clinical lead roles, but also those, it's our newly appointed consultants. All clinicians have a role in that, and cascading that message through. Just in terms of observation more broadly, the only other observation I would make is that Richard Thomas and the comms team have done a great job in terms of cascading those messages through the midweek message, but also it's on the front page of Bay Health this week. And actually, just judging from the comments that we do get back from a wide range of staff groups, so it's not just our clinical staff, but the non-clinical staff as well. There clearly is engagement in that. There's always a challenge in an organisation of this size of making sure the message penetrates. And as Liz has said, it's largely a matter of reiterating, re-emphasising those messages. But from a medical point of view, there clearly is a lot of engagement in that, and a recognition of the part that people play more broadly in ensuring we make best use of resource, Joe. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Rena, can I just ask you, is your point related to the discussion we're having?
Not specifically,
Okay.
no, Jo.
Right, thank you. And Steve, is yours?
No, it's a bit more general, Chair.
Right, okay. So, Darren, we'll come back to you then because you wanted to comment on the point that Anne-Louise made.
Yes, thank you. And Liz has spotted my predictability in this space. There are a number of areas where we're just spending the money not as well as we could. So by addressing things like our theatre efficiency and our length of stay in various beds, I'm not just pointing to acute, we can improve quality and spend less money. There are areas where some of our practice is a little out of date in terms of printing and document retention, etc. And a more modern approach to that through some of the digital solutions would sort those costs as well. So I think there are things that we can, and then there's the the discussion that we've all had live around staff unavailability and sickness absence, and we need to help people be more present at work. All of those things will make quality better and cost less money. But we do also have to make some very difficult decisions as well. So I'm not saying it's that easy, but we need to run both lines of activity, Chair, pursuit of quality for lower cost and that some of those hard decisions to get us through this into a better place.
Thank you. And it is the triangulation, isn't it, of performance, finance, safety, stroke quality as well. Anne-Louise, you want to come back on that point?
Just to say that I am really assured by the answers, but staff are going to want to see concrete evidence that the reduction in, for example, variable pay, which means perhaps fewer staff on the ward, is making a difference and the quality stays up. I don't quite know how it can be captured. Richard Thomas may have a better way of doing it, but it would be good to see regular demonstrations, reviews of what's going on in various areas to show how the kind of controls that are being put in are making a difference and, as Darren says, improving the quality of the care that we give. As I say, I don't know quite how that can be done, but people will want to see that it's being done. It's not just a nebulous thing that we say ought to be done, because that will help bottom line.
Thank you. Richard T, do you want to come back on that? And then, Rena, I will come to you, promise. Richard?
Yeah, thanks, Anne-Louise. I think that's a really good sort of point and challenge to make. I think we're coming to the sharp end of things now in terms of this financial year, and I think in the next 2 to 3 sort of months, as we get the end of month financial reports through, I think we can sort of link more clearly, I think, the controls and the actions that have been taken with the outcomes then in terms of the improved financial performance. So we'll explicitly link those more regularly and frequently in our comms.
Thank you. Thank you. Rena, please come in.
Yeah, it was just a question, because obviously this action plan, the timescales are very tight and we haven't got a lot of time. I just wondered what the view from our consultants Deloitte was on the timescales proposed here, and were they realistic for achieving the level of savings that we are proposing to save? Thank you.
Thank you. Darren, did you want to come back on that first?
I'm happy to, Chair. Rena, they were alongside us in all of these discussions and were present when we had the exec sign-off of the content of this paper yesterday morning. Clearly, it's evolved through PFC. So where we are with these actions is not something we thought up yesterday to implement tomorrow. We've been developing them for a number of weeks. They are aligned to the lines of opportunity that Deloitte have notified to us. Lots of those we knew as well anyway. So I think they're well constructed. I think that there is urgency as well, hence where the timescales are on now. I think it was very practical to have the UEC bed redesigned done after the winter break, so that's why that's deliberately January. I think some of these pay controls can become effective now, particularly given the way some of the rosters are being worked up over the Christmas break, which Liz and I discussed earlier today. So Deloitte would recognise them, say that they're supported by good plans, and we, as exec leads for this, now have to deliver them.
Thank you.
As a team.
Is that okay, Rena? Thank you. And Darren, I think at this point, I'll bring in a question from Nuria, because it is linked. And it's Nuria with her Chair of Audit hat on, asking you for assurance that all the non-recurrent opportunities highlighted are feasible in the timeline, and that the groundwork is in place to agree them, because she thinks that's really important when it comes to the external audit of our final outturn position.
Okay, thank you, Janet. I can take that now. So
Yeah.
the majority of the non-recurrent opportunities we've already got certainty on. Some of those involve holding budget, which isn't an audit issue, it's just a matter of holding spend back. Some are related to changes in our provisions with new information. So for instance, we've reworked some of the looked after children provisions because we know the distribution of that provision is a share between us and local authority and education. So there are working papers behind all of those. I think the ones that I would like to continue to keep live for board discussion and through audit committee as appropriate are the ones just set out in the opportunity section on page 14 of the report, which we're working through anyway. So I'm comfortable. There's not a lot there anyway, but what we've got is transparent.
Thank you. And perhaps, Darren, you could respond to Nuria outside the meeting with a response to that particular question, could you?
I'll do that directly, yes, Chair.
Smashing. Thank you. So, Steve, do come in then with your issues.
Thanks, Chair. And it's not unrelated to what Nuria just asked, but I think we can see a road through to 58.7 now with the savings that have been talked about in the paper. But it's going to be tough, and there's not a lot of flexibility. There's not a lot of leeway. And as the paper has laid out, there are a number of additional risks which are not yet catered for. And we've gone through what some of those are. The paper also refers to fortuitous non-recurrent benefits, but there may also be unfortuitous non-recurrent hits that take place through the winter period between now and the end of the year. So I just wonder how the executive team, how agile do we think we are, or do they think we are, to respond to such hits and to ensure in the 2 or 3 reporting deadlines that we've still got to go before it's too late to respond to any adverse hits or to the non-achievement of some of those things like the mental health repatriations that we talked about.
Thank you.
So we're running out of road, and we need to have that little bit of flexibility, I think.
Thank you, Steve. Abby, do you want to respond to that? On mute, Abby.
I turned on myself on to mute rather than off. I was already off. Apologies for that. Steve, that's very much at the forefront of our minds in terms of being able to transact and deliver what we're required to do in the remainder of the year. Colleagues, I think we've shared with a board before, but we now using at least half of the weekly informal executive meeting to have oversight of where we are in the delivery of the financial plan. So Deloitte colleagues are joining that meeting every week, and we are have introduced clarity in terms of the numbers that happened the previous week. So in terms of the decisions that were made, so we will be able to track very clearly, are we hitting that 50% reduction in the variable pay, and that will enable us to correct our course where we need to in terms of any further intervention that we need to put in place as an executive team to manage that. So we should have our finger on the pulse. It's not yet, all of the data is not yet flowing in a timely way because it's very tight over the weekend, the close down on Friday, and I get the list of things that I'm being asked to approve on a Friday morning for the team then to turn it around by 12 o'clock on Monday. But that's what we're asking them to do, particularly Tina's team who are keeping oversight on that. And Deloitte will help us track. So we need to track these actions very explicitly down through the organisation. So at directorate level, every department level and up through the system, to be able to show that the actions that we have agreed, if we agree them today, are being transacted, and we can see that happening. As I said, that should enable us to correct course if we then need to escalate any particular area of our delivery that's not delivering in line with the action that we've agreed today.
Steve, does that give you the assurance?
It gives me some assurance. Yes, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any other areas of questioning that haven't come up? Read the content of the paper, please. Okay, so can we move to the recommendations then? So we're asked firstly to consider the options. So can I just check, does everyone feel that they've had the opportunity to talk through and understand the options in full as we've gone through the paper? And do we consider that all the risks have been surfaced during our discussions? Yeah, so we've considered both the options and the risks. So therefore, are we prepared to move and support the recommendations that are set out in section 4 of the report that will take us to 11.7 million? Pretty content with that? And we do need to acknowledge in doing that, there are other opportunities that we have to consider because we need to get to 13 million. So are we content to agree the 4 areas of work that Darren outlined for us in terms of further consideration now to get us to that 13 and therefore 55.4 million? Everybody content with that? And then within that now we are acknowledging that we are going to protect the 104-week target. We're already achieving the 52-week target, but we're not going to try and better that. And we will make sure that we can hold it until the end of the financial year, because that is an important ministerial priority. We can tend to sign up to that. And then, of course, picking up Steve's point, there are still risks that we haven't mitigated, and we may have some unknown unknowns as we go into Q4, as it were. So clearly, we know the executive, we're keeping a very tight control on the actions we've identified, but Darren, early flagging of these non-mitigated risks and other options that the board will need to come back to in January and February and March, as things might occur. Have I covered everything, or is there anything that anyone else wants to flag? Thank you. Thank you. Well, Darren and executive colleagues, thank you very much. We do know that this has taken a phenomenal amount of your time. This is a really, really challenging financial position, but confidence in us as a board and confidence, not just for Welsh Government on Thursday, but for our staff and for our population is really important in terms of delivery around this and the confidence that we can give in so doing. So Darren, if we can prepare exactly what the board has approved today, because we'll need to present it on Thursday to the Cabinet Secretary and his officials. Is that okay?
Yes, Chair, thank you.
Thank you. And thank you all. Diolch yn fawr I chi gyd am eich cyfraniannau. Diolch yn fawr. Hwyl am nawr. Hwyl.
Thank you all.